Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Titans Season 4, Episode 8. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're picking up with Dick and Kory's situation where they wake up in the same bed, and they're just like, whoa, how do we get into these clothes? What's the last thing you remember? I remember getting jumped by the sheriff and his people. Last thing Kory remembers is not feeling well and being taken to the RV. So we've been drugged and we've been dressed up in this manner. And then Kory's just kind of asking a big question. Did we? And Dick's like, no. It's like, but it's like, how do we know for sure? It's like, it's this awkward thing where it's like, because I was thinking about, I was like, well, I know they've slept together, but that was a different situation. That was 100% intentional. Whereas this is a situation you woke up drugged, so you're not sure if anything happened. But it's like, yeah, she's like, I'm just assuming. He's like, assuming what? She's like, that nothing happened. He's like, yeah, nothing. So it's just, I love them being so awkward about it. And it is kind of sweet and interesting timing because, that them being in an awkward situation that they are kind of like both having feelings for each other but not really saying anything, and then the fact is that now they're here kind of playing house, because it was interesting, but the sheriff does explain it later on that I guess it was May's decision, like rather than having them killed, why not take your enemy and turn them into an ally? So she was, because basically this place erodes who you were and replaces it, because the music that's constantly playing in the background, it's all over town, and everyone ultimately ends up forgetting who they were. Because we learn about this from Megan and her dad. They're able to they're the only people in town who are themselves. They're just playing the role because they actually are reading lips and playing along, because no one knows that they've actually he intentionally did this to himself. Megan lost her hearing like at a young age, so for her, for them, it's like that's how they were able to block out the noise and remain themselves, because especially in her dad's case, it's like he didn't want to forget who he was and lose every bit of memory. And that's also the thing of a long enough time, no matter what you do, tinfoil, earbuds, nothing will be able to block out them, because it's magical, this place is. So that also answers a question I was curious about. It's is this was this the cult coming in and kind of running this town? It's no, basically all the townsfolk were turned into cult followers, because they were basically, everything that they were was eroded and erased and made them kind of not empty vessels, but empty blobs to basically imprint whatever you need onto them. And each and every one of them is a devout believer and stuff like that. So I thought it was interesting Dick's way of handling this. So it's all right, so we don't forget who we were. What we're going to do is, I'm really quickly too, I'm also curious when they showed up at that place and they're like, oh yeah, trying to speak like Carol and Ted. How did you, I guess they were I guess on some level they had memories that were implanted of who they were as Ted and Carol, because it's they were just randomly saying stuff that no one else had an issue with, so it must have seemed very in character for Ted and Carol. So that's why I'm how did you figure that out? Were you just spitballing it, being well, this is probably who we were as a couple, as Ted and Carol? But it might just be once again, the memories of who they're supposed to be as Ted and Carol were starting to erode who they were as Dick and Kory. So, but Dick's way to countermeasure this was to use a tactic Bruce taught him, which was basically something Bruce came up with just in case him and Constantine ever had a falling out, I guess if it ever came down to a situation, which I guess is also very befitting, because that's always kind of Bruce/Batman's thing of yeah, he knows how to and always has a countermeasure against every person he met, especially amongst the Justice League. Is yeah, I kind of need to know how to take down some of the most powerful people on this planet in case their power ever gets used against humanity. So, which obviously there's been plenty of storylines that have incorporated that, with him having to go up against some fellow heroes, in the Injustice storyline, for example. But either way, Kory wasn't about the idea, because she's well, for one, we need to focus on fighting Rachel, but two, the fact is that this is kind of this isn't going to really work. It's she's every time you get dragged back into this Bruce stuff, and you just you try to fight it, but you always get dragged back to it some shape or form, because Dick is saying right, the more painful a memory is, the more it kind of centers who you are. It becomes it's a part of you, and it'll trigger something in you to remember. So both of them go off and they record different their recordings, obviously with some painful memories and stuff like that, and both of them bring up the time that they hooked up back in season 1. and they both had different perspectives on it, because especially for Kory, it's like especially last season, there was so much death last season that it really hit her when Dick died, because it's like she's like, you really don't really know how you feel about someone until they're gone. And later on, sadly, her memories do get wiped and she becomes purely Carol. And I just love that. And I thought it was like it's this heartbreaking moment where like he sees that she's become Carol and he's frustrated, and she's like, did I do something? He's like, no, you didn't. She's like, I don't understand. He's like, I know. And he's like, I gotta go, because he figured out where Rachel was. But she's like, please don't leave me. He's like, of course, I'd never leave you. I was like, oh, that was actually, like, the way he delivered the line too, and just how he's like holding her hand at the same time. I was like, that's actually really sweet, and it's sad and heartbreaking, because it's like, right, it's a moment where like how you really feel is coming to the surface. And ultimately how she ends up remembering everything, gaining back her memories, is because she didn't listen to the one that she made. She listened to the one that Dick made, and he had talked about that regret he had back then when they hooked up. Like, she was saying like, oh, maybe there's something more we should talk about, but he wasn't ready. He was still out, obviously in his feelings, still dealing with like, figuring himself out situation, and he pushed her away, and his biggest regret is not being able to say anything then. And ultimately Kory says it wasn't the painful memories that brought her back, it was the good memories, like that, especially knowing, like, because for her, she was never fully sure of how he feels, and hearing, like, obviously that's one of his regrets, that he didn't tell her then and there how he really felt. He was like, I was so close to it as well, but he just pushed it down. So it's been there forever, and I guess he just felt like so much time has passed. She's moved on, I moved on, I have to move on, but maybe it's always been there in the back of his heart how he feels about Starfire. I might have talked about this during the first part of this, because I didn't know this until someone else pointed. I don't think I talked about it in season 3, but I might have talked about it early on in at the beginning of this season. But Starfire and Dick being a couple isn't a more modern thing. The more modern coupling is him and Barbara. But because once again, I'm basing this on someone else who's more knowledgeable. I want to say wasn't it on Absolute Comics? Formerly Absolute Comics, Marvel and DC, but now I think it's just Absolute Comics. They had talked about that previously. I think that's like a coupling from, I think Benny and Sal had talked about it. Like, that's a coupling from like the 80s. So because I think I had the conversation that most people probably know that coupling. My experience, the reason why I was like, oh yeah, Starfire and Dick are going to end up together, simply I didn't know about the him and Barbara thing, because I always thought that was weird. I was like, aren't you guys pseudo siblings? That's a whole conversation, but the reason why is probably because like people are like me, grew up on the Teen Titans cartoon. The Teen Titans cartoon, and even Teen Titans Go really leans into like Starfire's not quite there, but like Robin's super into her, and that was obviously like a big coupling in the original Teen Titans series from the early 2000s was that. So that was always kind of my inkling. So for us to kind of be circling back to that in the final season, that's kind of neat. But they already kind of like started like adding the, like, they were setting that up even last season because of like the vision he had about him and Kory having a daughter together. So, but anyway, you had Dick going up against the sheriff and his people, because they had washed away all that they were. I mean, who knows? Like, because the sheriff is kind of like the main person here, but I don't know if maybe he remembered enough of who he was to know, like, hey, it wasn't worth it, because he's trying to convince Dick, like, hey, let who you were before, all that you've lost, all that you've been through, all the terrible stuff in your life, you get to wash it away and become someone new. But obviously it's like, nah, I'm here for Rachel, and kick some ass along the way. Even at one point in time, started busting some heads and body parts up using a Bible, which immediately makes me think, oh, the power of Christ compels you, bitch. It's literally what I said out loud when he was doing that. I guess in this regard, the power of Trigon compels you, I guess, because I'm sure those are doctrines about Trigon and stuff, so. I also love that Rachel was kind of handling stuff herself, because like two people were there to kill her, but it's like, hey, like, come on, I'm the daughter of Trigon. Like, if Trigon comes back, like, well, not if, when he comes back, or do you really want to be the one that had to explain, like, you killed his daughter? And so one guy was like, I'm not about to do it. The other guy's like, fine, I'll do it. The guy's like, no. Guy A's like, no, Cop B, you need to put that down. It's like, all right. So Cop B shoots Cop A in the leg. Cop A shoots him, and I'm like, they're shooting each other. I was like, oh, I guess, like, I guess you killed each other. Nope. Cop B's still alive, and before he could have a chance to shoot Rachel, Dick knocks him out, and it's like, she's like, wow, it took you long enough. He's like, yeah, it's a long story. It took me a while to get here. Sorry. So, which, since I'm right here with the Rachel, I'll focus on, circle back to her situation. Because obviously, Sebastian's being, worshipped as Brother Blood. Because obviously the time has come now. And obviously they're talking about killing Rachel because she's a heretic, but you could tell, like, it bothers Sebastian because it's like, she is, regardless of it all, that's still your half-sister. So he feels a certain way about it. He tells his mom later on, it's like, no, I want to be the one that kills her because I need to cut away all my weakness. But his mom was saying, like, no, you can't. I was like, what? Why can't he? Like, is it because, like, she's tied to whatever he is? So if he kills her, like, maybe he loses what he's got. It's like, no, more so that if he kills her, he dies as well because they are fully connected. Maybe it's a byproduct of him fully embracing being Trigon's son, but she's also Trigon's daughter. So the blood runs through them, connecting them. So that's why. But it seems like anyone can kill Rachel without it affecting Sebastian. But if Sebastian tries to kill Rachel, they get hurt. And if Rachel probably tried to kill Sebastian, which she wouldn't, but if she did, that'd probably have the same result. But when he heals his wounds later on, it heals Rachel's as well. So the connection fully works both ways. But it's like, Rachel's trying to convince him, your mom doesn't care about you. I mean, look at you. She didn't bother telling you about this connection, what would happen in this regard, because you don't matter to her. Just like for my mom, we were both means to an end for our moms to get closer to Trigon, to be closer in his favor. Like, and we're just means to an end. Like, I'm sure for her, it's like, Trigon's just going to possess your body and you be like his mortal flesh here in this world. You're just going to be a sacrifice to bring him into this world. That's all. You're just a means to an end. But Sebastian's not willing to listen. So, and I even love Rachel kind of threw like his greatest fear back at him by being like, the moment you help raise Trigon again, you'll go back to being exactly what you're afraid of being, a nobody. Because now he's somebody for the first time, considering like all throughout his life, he's always felt like a nobody. Now he gets to finally be somebody, have the family he always wanted. But there's a family waiting for you right there with Rachel, but you're denying her for this family that worships you and makes you feel like a somebody because Rachel didn't make you feel enough like a somebody. At the same time, this is all going down. Bernard had locked on to Starfire's signature, and it's like, right, we're going to go to the town, and we're going to go find where the signature leads. But it turns out it led to a radio tower. It's like, huh? Because this was after Megan's dad had explained that basically the town before it became what it is now and put in this little pocket dimension, it was burned to the ground, and they came here and kind of took over things like 10 years ago. But at the radio tower, they met William. It's Megan's brother, and he was like standing in front of like all these plants that had people's pictures. I guess it was meant to be like a way to remember everyone that died in the town or whatever. But he kept having this feeling like, no, I know my dad and my sister are still out there. And Tim kind of trusted that feeling because for him, it's like, what was it? It was called the sun something that his mom would get. It was this instinct, this feeling, but Bernard couldn't feel it because for him, it's like he comes from a very scientific standpoint. He couldn't find Starfire's signature anymore. It's like, all right, something's going on here, so I need to find a scientific explanation for it. But for Tim, it's like, no, I feel this. I trust William's feelings, so trust me on this. But for Bernard, that's not enough. Sun dogs is what it's called. I was like, oh, I thought things were going to just be awkward. It's like, no, things seem great, and now they just seem flat out, oh, that's sad. It's just the difference is because obviously they're still in the process of learning about each other, but Tim's kind of like, yeah, I'm one who is kind of really like into trusting my feelings, but Bernard's very like scientific, or like, no, I need a scientific explanation. But even he eventually turned around and he's like, yeah, I know what you're thinking to yourself, that you're lucky to have someone who is so intellectually flexible that kind of finally trusted something that is his feelings, kind of had a sun dog's moment of himself of sorts. And what was it? He was saying something of like, we have to turn up like the, it was something he was saying, and basically it's like, wait, did you just say we have to turn up the volume, Bernard? And he's like, sort of, yeah, that's what I said. It was a really cute moment they had. But basically it allowed them to like plug in his electrical vehicle and kind of power up the radio station. And William played a song and he was like, Dad, Megan, I know you're out there. And even though their hearing being what it is, like their dad could still hear it. Like it was breaking through the boundaries because Bernard figured like, right, if you're feeling what you're feeling, there might be, something like someone could be here without being here. So it could be like an interdimensional pocket thing. Because at the same time, this is all happening. Dick and Rachel are trying to find their way to the radio station and make their way in and end up killing the guy behind it. I guess that's Vinny, the one who was plugged up to all the blood stuff. It kind of reminds me of Pennyworth in that regard, because there was the guy in the 3rd season who kind of mind controlled things. I can't remember what the whole deal of the place was, but Alfred ended up killing him. He was kind of like a meta. I don't know if that's what Vinny's case was. Like he was a meta and like the blood there kind of acted as like the means of him kind of swaying and controlling the town the way he did. But he died and the whole barrier that was keeping the town in the little pocket dimension eventually faded. So they all made it out, including Megan and her dad. But now you're like, well, the rest of the town might have made it out too. But now the question is, they probably lost who they were. I'm curious, like, are they fully blank slates, or now that it's all done, are they back to being themselves? Are they no longer the cult followers? I mean, not like she needs them anyway. They were just there to keep the horn safe until Sebastian could rise to power. But now that that's done, the town no longer serves the purpose it needed. Well, no, it's hard to say because the sheriff, the keeper, he seemed like he was still all about this. But it could be a thing of he was the only one that was like, no, like well, maybe it could be a thing of maybe he never lost his memory. He's always been who he is, a follower in all of this. And the rest of the town were people that were like controlled by this? Or is that supposed to imply that none of them are ever going to be normal again? They're always going to be the cult followers they are, because who they were is completely gone forever. Even with the whole situation shut down, it won't bring them back to who they were. Or once again, could they be blank spots? It's really unclear on that point. But so we have that situation, and then we have our ending where we have Sebastian and Connor having their sit down, and it's like, oh, what are we toasting? And he's like, the future. So I'm wondering, is Connor planning on manipulating and using Sebastian to his own means? Because he probably knows enough of Sebastian's weaknesses to use that to turn him against May, or I'm sure he's gonna, he's in this Lex Luthor bag obviously right now. So what that fully entails, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But I can only assume, because Mercy told him last episode, you could be the one to take down Sebastian and May in your own right. So I guess he's handling this rather than kind of handling this maybe a more soup way, he's handling it as in Superman way. He's handling it more of the manipulative, outsmarting you and using you against yourself, like Luthor type of way. So we'll have to wait to see to kind of get some clarity on that. I'm really interested to see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. I believe, I don't know if I looked. I'm assuming the next episodes are week to week. I guess so. We'll see next week whether or not. I'd assume it's only going to be one episode, but maybe because of the way these episodes were really kind of a package deal, the way they were, done. So maybe these will probably be the only ones that are back to back. So it probably will be like one episode a week for the next 4 weeks, but we'll see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.